Somewhere on this field in northern France, scarred with craters, are the clues to a mystery. Here, a bloody battle was fought to capture one of the most heavily defended German positions of the First World War, Vimy Ridge. A stronghold on the Western Front, this single ridge was honeycombed with more than 20 miles of snaking tunnels, riven by 50 miles of trench and barbed wire, and battered by 6 million tons of artillery shells and mines. The ridge was deemed invincible. For almost 3 years, French and British forces had tried and failed to take the ridge at a cost of more than 200,000 lives. Yet incredibly, the Easter of 1917 saw the Allies do what few thought possible. The Canadians were able to take the ridge in just 4 days. The mystery is, how did they do it? To find out, aviation experts take to the skies to explore the world's first electronic battlefield.
Fire out!
Archaeologists uncover relics, puzzling clues, and weapons still deadly after all these years. Engineers dig deep under the earth, breaking through to the past and a lost city underground.
It goes a long, long way.
And they come face to face with the ghosts that haunt it. Together, they investigate the 3 dimensions of an impossible mission that went from heaven to hell on Vimy Ridge. On the very site where the battle for Vimy Ridge took place, a massive investigation is underway.
Look at that. But it's very funny because we're actually standing on the trenches, and this is how it was dug. It's the sort of thing that you're going to use in the attack down the back of your pack. So when you get onto your new position, you need to start digging in. The guys in Iraq and Afghanistan are digging in with the same shovels. Here we've got a curiosity. The ground just this side of the fence was never ploughed. The result is the trenches show up perfectly and allow us to come in and have a look, just look under the surface and look at those trenches.
Within a few hours of digging, the investigators make a discovery, a reminder of the lives lost here.
There was a lot of very savage fighting going on here before the British and Canadian troops actually even arrived. And when we excavate these sites, you know, we're all thinking of Canadians and British soldiers, but in fact there's an awful lot of French equipment and ammunition lying around from this earlier fighting. And this is what we've got here. You know, this French helmet is a piece of that evidence. It does make you wonder, you know, it's got a story to tell. Whose helmet was it?
The French and English were unable to beat the Germans because they were unable to reach them. Above them on Vimy Ridge, the Germans could see any enemies approaching. Any move up the hill was met by a hail of bullets and bombs and certain death. But somehow Canadian soldiers are able to find a way up the slopes of the ridge.
What I've got here is a account of the battle and about what the Germans thought of the Canadians. He describes it here. It says, on Vimy Ridge, regiments of the 79th Reserve Division awaited the attack in tense anticipation. Deployed against us were 4 of the best English attack divisions, the Canadians. So his nationalities are all a bit muddled up, but he certainly knows who they are, and he thinks they're pretty good fighters.
3 of those soldiers would be forever linked to the small Ontario town of Goderich. In the autumn of 1916, as casualties mount on the Western Front, Britain calls out to Canada, one of its dominions, for more men. As British subjects now living in a country barely 50 years old, Canadian soldiers have an identity crisis. 6 out of every 10 are British-born. They feel more British than Canadian. Still, from the very start of the war, men signed up by the thousands to join a newly created Canadian Expeditionary Force, and by 1916, Canada is commanding its own divisions. At some point in their lives, 3 of the small-town soldiers who sign up would live on the same street in Goderich: Percy James, Jack Carter, and Dudley Holmes. Mark George, a military historian and former Army officer, sets out to find out more about the local boys.
Before they leave, those soldiers parade in town here, and the whole town turns out, and this is something which is common to every Canadian town. It would have looked like a small town parade today. Everyone would have turned out, so there would have been people on the grass, people lining the sidewalks. The bands from the battalions would have been leading, playing the Maple Leaf Forever and other good marches. To have the whole community standing there cheering as you go must have been an awesome feeling.
The boys who leave the town square in Goderich march into a war they know little about. In the autumn of 1916, 2 years into the war, the Germans are dug in along a line of trenches that stretches across northern France, from the English Channel to the Swiss border, the Western Front. Locked in a bloody standoff, more than 1 million Allies have been slaughtered by German guns. Vimy Ridge, the stronghold so many had failed to take, is where the new Canadian recruits are headed for what can only be seen as a glorified suicide mission. Down the street from the local theater, above a Goderich TV shop, a trunk is discovered full of Great War letters and mementos from Percy James, one of the soldiers headed straight into the eye of the storm.
It's a great old trunk. Well, that is a German Army belt buckle. This would likely be something which Percy removed from a prisoner or a body of a German that he encountered on the battlefield. It's hard to imagine how lonely it must have been for soldiers like Percy, to leave home in 1914 and the only contact you have with your family is by letter. There's always a little sense of prying, because these really weren't intended for your eyes. But at the same time, you can't resist the opportunity to get to know someone, who's been dead for 40 years and who experienced something so monumental and so fundamental to, Canadian identity today. So, dear father and mother,
just a line to let you know that everything is all right, and I'm in the boat going down the river. When we reached the ocean, we could see the south shore of Newfoundland. Shortly after, it disappeared, and all we were left with was the open water.
When he reaches the shores of Europe, 23-year-old Percy James, the oldest of 3 children, leaves behind his hometown, his family, his job as a tool maker, and everything he has ever known before.
All we're doing, we're just looking for metallic anomalies. It's a grenade, obviously, but it's either a number 5 or a number 23. I'm quite willing to stake my life on the fact that that wouldn't go off unless you did something really stupid with it, like you sat with a cigarette under it or something like that. What's that near your right foot? Right, over, fast.
Well, again, it's more ammunition. You can see there's a whole charger of 5 rounds there. Just lying there. This is all potentially the Vimy Ridge fighting.
In excavating the battlefield at Vimy Ridge, it's obvious that the Canadian forces took firepower to a whole new level. Canada brings in 245 heavy guns, 3 times the number used at the Battle of the Somme, to bolster its bullets and bombs.
What these are the pulls from the fuses, from the Stokes bombs. So they'd actually have the bombs, pull these out, arm the bomb, and then drop it down the mortar, and off it goes. And they must have been really firing them off from that trench over there, one after the other. What I say is, this was the nice end to be at. It was the other end where the Germans were receiving these. Would have been less pleasant, I'm sure.
But firepower alone isn't going to win the ridge. They also need to understand the battlefield inside and out. They need to know every single inch of Vimy Ridge. Deep in the vaults of the Canadian War Museum, a forgotten piece of history, a detailed 3D model of the ridge, likely used for planning by the battle's masterminds, British Commander Julian Byng and his Canadian General Arthur Currie.
They are essentially cardboard layered underneath topographical maps so that the contour intervals of the ground are shown. So you can actually get a sense of how the land slopes up toward Vimy Ridge and a good sense of the steepness of the backside. This is the German side. If you look at the ground, you're attacking uphill everywhere. But it is a very much a dominating piece of ground. If you're sitting up on Vimy Ridge, you can see for miles. If you have an enemy that can see miles behind your front lines, it's pretty hard to sneak up on them.
In the most ambitious and thorough training program of its time, Byng and Currie used such maps to build a 4-mile full-scale replica in France to train its men. In the run-up to the battle, Canadian soldiers will practice here without stop. But the training is not only done overseas. At home, soldiers are trained in the latest techniques in trench warfare on a specially designed facility near Shiloh, Manitoba. Near that same facility, modern soldiers recently back from Afghanistan practice a crucial tactic used at Vimy, the creeping barrage.
We're here at Camp Hughes Provincial Heritage Site in Manitoba. Almost 30,000 Canadian soldiers were trained in these trenches, and most of those men went on to take Vimy Ridge.
Canadian soldiers perfecting the creeping barrage could only imagine what that first day at Vimy would really be like.
So the platoon is in the frontline trenches, and they're ready to go. Soon you're going to see a flash of muzzles across the back of the horizon as over 1,000 guns open fire to support the Canadian troops, and 130 machine guns are firing in this barrage. An avalanche of steel coming over the heads of the troops as they go over the top.
In the past at Vimy, the Allies had only used artillery to strike the enemy. But Byng and Currie have another idea. They decide to use that firepower to protect troops while they physically charge the Germans, throwing down a wall of shells only slightly ahead of them.
The soldiers are going to spread out into no man's land, and they're going to get themselves oriented on the German trenches. In real life, they would be trained to keep as close to our barrage as they possibly could.
The British had used the creeping barrage in the past, but timing had been a problem. Advance too slowly, and the artillery will not offer proper cover. Advance too quickly, and men fall to friendly fire.
Low air burst. Shrapnel was normally burst 75 yards from the German trenches. The Canadians bursted at only 25 yards, nice and low, so it can't hurt our own troops. The troops are trained to get as close as possible to the line of shrapnel, which is marked by white puff clouds of smoke in front of them. They get down, and now they're going to wait until the barrage lifts. And these guys are going to get up and clear those German trenches.
But the creeping barrage can only work if the soldiers know where the enemy is located on the field. To do that, they need help from above, from the second dimension of the battle for Vimy Ridge. January 1917, 6,000 feet over Vimy Ridge. With only 3 months left before the Canadian attack, German and Allied airmen meet in what is the new battlefield of the First World War, the skies. It's only been 13 years since the Wright brothers showed the world that man can fly. And in Canada's master plan, the skies are a big part of winning the ridge.
When we think about aircraft in the First World War, you think about the Red Baron flying around shooting down other aircraft. Well, that's one job. The most important job, frankly, was observation. And those observation aircraft were two-man aircraft, pilot and observer. The observer was a gunner for defense, and he has a camera. And his job is to take photographs on mosaic, taking them one after another as they fly over a piece of ground. So that way they can keep a record of how the German positions are changing. Are the batteries there? Are the targets for artillery?
One of the air observers is Dudley Holmes from Goderich. The 22-year-old son of a successful lawyer, Dudley Holmes is trained as an observer in England in the hope of soon becoming a full-fledged pilot. Few have ever seen the world from the air. Dudley and others do it under the worst possible conditions. Visible landmarks are all they have to guide them.
These people are facing an incredible array of danger from the ground, from enemy aircraft, from simply crashing, and a lot of aircraft are lost by that. And their life expectancy is extremely short. In fact, it's far more dangerous being in the aircraft than it is being an infantry officer in the trenches.
Observers like Dudley are also responsible for coordinating artillery strikes, but it's not clear how they were able to communicate with the ground below. To answer that question, Terry LaBelle, a former jet pilot with the Canadian Forces Snowbirds, and Captain Chuck Roeder, take to the air in a plane similar to that flown over Vimy. For both men, it's a long way from a supersonic jet.
Dudley Holmes would have been 21, 22 years old by the time he got into an aircraft. He's probably hasn't seen a whole heck of a lot of them ever in his life. He looks at this thing, it's canvas covered, it's wood, tube, and fabric. There's not a lot to inspire a great deal of confidence. You can try it that way. Keep coming, you're doing fine. He probably really wanted to be a pilot, but he has to go through the observer phase first before they'll accept him as a pilot. So he's got to do this thing. He's got to grit his teeth and get this job done before he gets to go on and do what he really wants to do with another guy driving the airplane. Completely new environment. It's like you and I going into space.
Oh, my God. That is just amazing.
Okay, try it this way.
I'm 6 foot, and I can't imagine a guy bigger than me or heavier set than me trying to climb into this monster.
While the observation plane scouts above, on the ground, the troops get into position.
Lower! Advance!
At an artillery range in Shiloh, Manitoba, modern soldiers try their hand at a 1917 air-to-ground artillery mission. To do it right, they bring in very real and very lethal 32-pound shells and a 105mm howitzer, the modern equivalent of the guns used at Vimy. In the air, the observer pinpoints a German bunker on the ridge. All he has to do now is communicate down the target position. But in 1917, he has no phones, no satellites, no computers, no walkie-talkies.
Basically, we have a Morse code, and all I'm going to do is strap it to my leg so that I can send appropriate information back to the ground. And we have another unit similar to this on the ground where somebody's going to receive the data.
Not my command, just fire. Out.
Not my command.
For the first time ever, the planes at Vimy are fitted with wireless radio transmitters that allow them to send down the signal. It's the world's first electronic battlefield.
In 1917, the aircraft can't hear any return signal. All they can do is send Morse code. The receiver would be too heavy for the airplane.
Troops on the ground respond to the observer by using markers known as pop-em panels.
That tells him that the gun is ready to fire. We have someone in the command post who will hear the Morse code. They'll tell us that they've heard it, and we'll lay these panels out and Chuck Rotor in the aircraft will be able to look down and know that we've got the right signal.
Fire out.
A one, a ready. Number one, fire!
Because they have no voice capability, air-to-ground missions are highly imperfect. To complete his mission, the observer beeps down new coordinates to help the units adjust their aim.
The aircraft then does a correction. He figures out where the round hit in relation to the target that he wants, and he tells the command post where to move that round on the next shot. Before they had wireless, the aircraft would fly over the gun line and write the correction on paper and drop it. Compared to what they were doing in 1915, this is fairly advanced.
Elevation, 129.
But hitting the enemy dead on isn't always necessary.
The radius of the round, the killing radius, is like 50 meters, 30 meters. The rounds are not going all at the same spot. They're going around like that. And right now we just have one gun with a regiment here. I would be gone, for sure. End of mission.
By the time the battle for Vimy would be over, some 17 Canadian airmen would be killed in action. 4 would go missing, and 8 would be wounded. On the ground, Percy James turns his thoughts to home.
Dear Mother, I think you had asked me if there was any heather in the fields over here. I said I could not find any, but the other day I was walking along a narrow path, and a Scottish man told me that there was some
heather. And if it hadn't been for him, I would not have known it. So a 90-year-old piece of heather from the battlefields of France and Flanders. It is amazing to see something like this. This is really something that Percy actually picked, and took the time to send home to his mom. It makes it seem very immediate. It's sort of like having them here.
Back on the Vimy Ridge battlefield, the investigators make a puzzling discovery.
I don't know. You wind. But what you wind, we don't know.
Within a 10-foot radius, they uncover a set of seemingly unrelated objects.
Bag of nails. Timber nails. Shoes for putting in shoring and all that kind of things.
It's what looks to be a very small wheel, metal spokes coming down to a central axle here. I'm starting to get the spokes as one.
A pickaxe like that is, although soldiers use them in trenches, they're more commonly a specialist engineer's tool. There's another piece of this really solid chalk, big pieces, and this stuff comes out from some depth down. What we've got is, you can see here, there's a series of pieces of metal, which look basically like a spring inside it. It's this stuff. And that is actually rubber tube. So what we've got is we've got a reinforced rubber hose. And what that is it's an air supply hose for a tunnel system. I think I'm convinced it's a tunnel now. I'm prepared to actually,
We're declaring it a tunnel.
We're declaring it a tunnel. It's
Everything
official.
the finding relates to it being a tunnel. So.
Yeah, got a little underground train. That makes it a tunnel in my book.
They uncover evidence of a dark and treacherous underground world, unseen in almost 100 years. The entrance to the third dimension of the battle for Vimy Ridge. After a set of rails is unearthed at the dig, a team led by Colonel Philip Robinson gets ready to explore a tunnel on the site. A man with a passion for holes in the ground, the colonel, a former Royal Engineer, knows better than anyone else what it's like for a soldier to be deep beneath the earth.
Let your imagination go underground. It's just a maze of tunnels, of dugouts, tunnels linking dugouts. So what you actually have is what you might even call an underground trench system. Yes, now, if you'd all turn your lights out, you will find yourselves plunged into an absolute total darkness. There's not a trace of light here. In this kind of total darkness, your imagination really begins to play tricks. That's when you can hear, in fact, let's stop for a moment, and I'll stop speaking, and you'll probably, give it a few seconds, you'll probably hear your heartbeat.
In all, there are 10 miles of tunnels. At their deepest, they descend 100 feet into the ground. More than 1,000 Allied soldiers are needed to build each one, cutting through hard chalk at an incredible rate of 20 feet a day. The tunnels are built for one reason and one reason only: to plant underground mines to blow up the enemy. But it's not only the Allies that build them.
We're in what was a crater originally fired by the Germans in late 1915. The tunnel that the Germans would have driven originally to lay the mine charge for this would be somewhere over there further to the east. But if you had good trenches and good dugouts, you had a certain degree of safety and security. But once you came under mining attack, you're in a position where you don't know when you're going to be blown up from below.
Vimy Ridge is heavily mined by both the Allies and the Germans. Over an 18-month period, more than 150 mines are fired. Tens of thousands of Allied soldiers are destroyed by enemy explosions.
We all have a terror of being buried alive. And this, of course, is what it did to a lot of them. What we don't know, in this area here at Vimy, how many, perhaps, French soldiers, in this case, lie still underground, either side of this mine, perhaps dozens, maybe a couple of hundred, buried by a charge this big going off.
Back at the dig, investigators uncover sobering evidence of those lost to underground mining.
Two bones side by side.
That's the major heel bone in there. That's the ankle bones up there. These are toes heading off in that direction. We've got the very base of the ankle bone here, but that doesn't appear to lead anywhere, so we think we've only got it from there down. And also the front portion, the whole toe cap section, and the tips of the toes are missing.
All we did was literally take off the topside, and as you can see, it's very, very shallow. And as we're cleaning that back, we came across what looks like a human femur. It's broken here, and it's quite badly shattered there, because obviously if this had been a soldier lying down on his back, the other leg would have been here, the pelvis here, his legs going off in this direction. We don't know whether that's British, Canadian, German, French, no idea at all. So it's one of thousands and thousands. I can only assume that this poor individual got blown to pieces.
We've opened two small areas, you know, each 4 meters by 2, and in 2 out of 3 now we found pieces of people, and that gives you an idea that if you were to excavate this whole area, that wouldn't be atypical. And what that means in 1917 is that this whole field and all the area through the park there and there is full of bits of people.
People who left behind evidence of who they were and what they were fighting for.
We just come up with a Canadian flash, shoulder flash.
It's come out from underneath the level of the trench boards. So it's been dropped or fallen off and gone in between the boards.
William?
Oh, wow. You don't get much better than that. It's even got Canada written on it and that. But the British soldiers were definitely not wearing these. So that's really good. Excellent.
The presence of Canada here is a bit shadowy in terms of the equipment because you can't be sure which it is. But this is pretty uncontrovertible, you know. I mean, I know we know they were here, but it's nice to have it demonstrated so clearly.
Hang on, top row, second left. There we are. Take it back, Richard.
Second left side.
There he is. But look at the modified collar. That's very Canadian styly.
Not only do their uniforms look different, but the colonials feel different too. They neither talk like the British, nor do they act like them.
Canadian soldiers are known to be free-thinking, free-drinking, hard-fighting. They're not very prone to saluting at the right times. They tend to look very scruffy.
With the attack on Vimy still 2 months away, the scruffy Canadians take advantage of any opportunity to get away from the battlefield. Nowhere is their reputation more strongly felt than when the boys go on leave on the busy streets of London.
For these young men coming from small towns in Canada, coming to the UK, to come to London, to be at the heart of the empire and have time on their hands and get paid for doing it, means they're going to make the maximum of this very brief time away from the battlefields. So when he got here, the price of a beer compared to what a British soldier was paying is a fraction of his daily pay. It really wouldn't worry him too much at all. He could have quite a lot. And there was massive jealousy between British soldiers on leave and Canadian soldiers because they earn so much more. And they can be spectacularly profligate with buying rounds of drink in a way that British soldiers were frankly embarrassed by.
Canadian boys like Percy James and Dudley Holmes not only bond over endless pints, but also over local girls.
Dear Father, just a line to let you know that I'm on leave. I'm having a pretty good time, as it is nothing here to have 3 or 4 girls around you at once. The only thing I have against leave is the getting back.
The bond forged by the Canadian boys on leave is equally strong on the training fields. Commander Byng and General Currie capitalize on that bond to create a new revolutionary weapon at Vimy Ridge. Instead of the old military top-down model, they turn some of the decision-making over to the smallest tactical unit, the platoon.
The platoon attack used at Vimy, it was a revolution in tactical thought. It really is the birth of modern warfare. So our platoon has made it across no man's land, through our own wire, and they're lying on the ground waiting for our barrage to lift the next 100 yards before they get up. So we'll imagine the barrage lifts. We've just crossed the German front line. They're going to advance over this hill, and they would be told to expect that the Germans would have positions on the rear of the hill. And what the troops are going to find is as they get over this hill, there's a German machine gun.
In the past, large companies of 120 soldiers had suffered great losses at Vimy because of poor communication. Now, around a third of that size, each platoon has 4 sections that can communicate quickly and turn on a dime.
So the runner is going to come back up and explain what the platoon commander wants.
Around and do a left flanking.
Roger. Rifle section, 2 scouts, we're doing the left flanking.
Each section is self-contained with its own machine gun, rifle, and grenade experts. In training them, the Canadian Corps insists that every soldier knows where he's going and where everyone is at all times.
Eyes on!
They're firing on the German machine gun now. The rifle section and the bombing section are moving around the hill to outflank the German. The rifle grenade section is in this German frontline trench, and they're firing rifle grenades that are arcing over the heads of our troops to keep the German machine gunner suppressed and occupied. So what we're trying to do is keep his attention this way. We're firing on him. We want him to fire back at us, so he's not seeing our troops.
Charge! Go, go, go!
So our troops have taken out the German machine gun, and what they're trained to do next is to catch up to the barrage as quickly as they can.
Second line! Up, up!
The new platoon attacks are really the key to victory for the Canadians at Vimy Ridge.
In late March 1917, with their mission only 2 weeks away, Canadian soldiers like Percy James, spending time in the front trenches, experienced the arrival of a sinister weapon, new to the First World War. A weapon that investigators come face to face with as they continue to dig.
Funny smell in the bottom of that listed trench.
Go, come on.
That way.
Clear it.
The Vimy investigators uncover a large metal object.
A couple of minutes ago we had a shout that there was a funny smell anyway, so we've cleared the site, and what's happened is that our two EOD people, our explosive experts, have gone in.
There's like a shotgun cartridge fuse. You drop it onto a pin, then fires out of a launch tube. It could have anything from mustard and it's high explosive. That's it, and it's time for you to go now, I'm afraid.
Throughout the ridge, in the trenches and tunnels, hundreds of soldiers buckle under thick yellow-brown clouds. Deadly gas. To win the battle, Canadians need to be well protected. They stock up on the very latest in gas warfare protection. Smallbox respirators.
Okay, it's clear. It's clear!
As far as we know, we've searched the base now. It's clear for you guys to go back in now. We'll get in touch with the French EOD and they'll take them away and dispose of them. Controlled explosion, probably.
On this day, the researchers get lucky. But with the battle looming around the corner, the Canadian Corps can't afford to depend on luck. For the planned attack on Vimy Ridge to work, its soldiers are going to have to be focused and pull together as one. Needing to step up the effort, the Canadian Corps emphasizes discipline. Percy James feels the shock waves. When a prisoner escapes on his watch, Percy's life takes an unexpected turn.
Dear Father, perhaps you read in the local newspaper of a recent account with a prisoner that does my reputation no good. I have got to say that I had nothing to do with that affair.
Private Percy James was in the town of Saint-Eloi. He was there because he was being court-martialed. He was being court-martialed alongside his corporal, Corporal Mackenzie. The two of them had gone to collect a prisoner. They then had to guard him for the night. But during that evening, he escaped. Whether it was from a house or from a tent, I don't know. But the fact is, in the morning, the two of them are facing a court-martial. Their charge was they'd unlawfully allowed a prisoner to escape. But Percy James was found guilty of all the charges. It was his fault the prisoner had escaped. And as a result, he was sentenced to field punishment number 1. It's the public manacling or tying to a fixed object. And that was done for a maximum of 2 hours a day. But over, in his case, 2 weeks, you'd be manacled by your hands, each side to the wheel, to the spokes, and then you'd be upright against that for 2 or more hours. It's extremely painful. If you slump, then you risk doing yourself a great injury, and at the end of 2 hours, you come down and you go back to the guard room. You don't go back to your mates, and you'll be on a really rotten diet. And certainly, he would never have forgotten that.
But Percy and his fellow soldiers have bigger things to think about. The challenge of the Canadian Corps is how to secretly and safely position the 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers who will go over the top. The frontline trenches can only hold half of them. Byng and Curry want to ensure that the other half aren't killed by the enemy before they even get a chance to fight. The answer lies deep underground, where investigators digging through the crumbling labyrinth of tunnels break through an opening sealed up and abandoned 90 years ago.
We've now made our way down for about a total of 190 meters. We're in front of a chalk blockage of spill that's come in from a side incline. It's an area we've really got to explore. We know very little about it.
The colonel and his team of Great War tunnelers prepare to enter a subterranean world where no one has set foot since 1917. Because the air could be poisoned by deadly gases and the ceiling could collapse at any time, every possible precaution is taken.
I've got to get to the front, we've got to get all the kit to the front, and we'll be lowering the floor, and then we'll put these things in just to hold the roof up, and that's potentially where the collapse could occur.
Preparation is everything. A mining tunnel could still be packed with deadly high explosives. Exhaustive checks have been made. They are ready for anything.
Yeah, if you can get a few, please,
You want to give
Chris.
us the old monitor?
Right.
Okay. Air's okay.
What's the oxygen level, Chris?
It's looking good. No noise. 19 and a 6.
Good.
Sandbags first. Timber coming through.
Okay, that's a long one.
Maybe somebody could...
Half an acro.
Home base.
That's a good one.
Through, okay. What have we got there, Chris?
Whoa. You got a pristine tunnel, untouched for 90 years. There's the old timbers where they collapsed. A little bit of ceiling collapse. Otherwise, pretty clean. The walls
Looking good.
Look good. It goes a long, long way. Whoa. Hill, it's a big steep hill. So I'll ease this, and then I can lower this floor down, and you can
Okay.
do the same on your side.
The walls are made of the same chalky material as the mining tunnels explored earlier. To move any further, the men need to widen the passageway back to its original size so they can safely enter.
Point it down the right down the.
Ooh, we have a pickaxe. It's quite short. Quite a short, dumpy one. Look at the big head here. There's the groove there. That's his bread and butter. That's his knife and fork. That's how he does his work. So it's going to have little short, those sort of strokes. Really tight to the body. A lot of power coming from the shoulders and the upper body. They were really tough characters.
As investigators travel deeper, the narrow corridor opens up to what appears to be a series of large caves. Whatever it is, it's too big to be a mining tunnel. They find what looks like sleeping quarters, kitchens, command posts, water reservoirs, and latrines. They've discovered an underground city known as a subway. In one of the greatest engineering feats of the war, Allied miners built 14 subways for the attack on Vimy Ridge. Designed to move thousands of men safely to the frontline trenches above, they are much larger than the mining tunnels.
Men were sat here for some time, eating their meals. You know, he's gone through 2 or 3 tins. That's where he sat. Obviously discarded some of his bullets, I'm not sure why, but saving weight, going through his bits and pieces.
Lit by generators and supplied by piped water, the subways hold thousands of men at a time. Men resting, eating, staying safe for a few hours while they wait to be called up to the surface to fight.
The soldiers were usually cramped to the one side, and this would have been just a hive of activity with ammunition going up and water going up and soldiers moving back and forth and just getting into position. And the stench of sweat and of dirty clothes and of mud and of gunpowder, it would have been just overpowering.
One of the soldiers who would find his way in these dank and dirty subways is the third boy linked to the small Ontario town of Goderich, 23-year-old Jack Carter. One of 8 children, Jack Carter, a carpenter by trade, is a battalion scout bringing in supplies and weapons, all the while struggling to breathe and trying to ignore the feeling that the walls are closing in.
Most soldiers would have been fairly eager and glad to get out of here despite what they were going into. But during the night, it was a good place to be, to ensure that you didn't get killed before you went over the top, at least.
Many of those who built the subways were coal miners, like team member Nipper MacLeod, a sixth-generation miner from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia.
You wouldn't have to worry about the roof coming in on you here. You can tell just by looking at this. It's safe. That's why they did so much of this digging. It's very safe in here. A lot safer than above ground with the shells coming down, you know?
Dear Mother and Father, well, we are back at the front again after a few days training. There are certainly some strange places that we live in around here. We found ourselves in a cave about 50 feet underground. It's not very comfortable, but it is bomb-proof.
Right here, look. See this wire? That's called cap wire. That's attached to a cap that you plug into a stick of dynamite. The cap explodes the dynamite, so. In the coal mines where I come from, we were mining under the Atlantic Ocean. So if you open up a ton like this, this would never last any more than a few days. This would come in. You know what I mean? So this is very stable. Very stable conditions.
But above ground in April 1917, what isn't so stable is the weather. As storms move across France, Commander Byng and General Currie worry that at 0 hour, their planes may be grounded. The Canadian Corps uses a new way to find enemy guns as an alternative to air surveillance. It's a variation on an old technique, flash spotting.
Flash spotting is a very important method because you can get an accurate enemy location. You can see the flash from a balloon or an airplane, but you can't accurately locate that. It's just a guess. So this really made the counter-bombardment fire at Vimy much more accurate.
The flash that the spotters are looking for is the flash of a German gun. 3 observers are positioned across the battlefield. On seeing the gun fired, each takes a bearing from a specific location. The 3 bearings allow the Canadians to take dead aim at their target.
What we have set up here are 3 survey instruments, just like this one. There's one here, we have one on a hill over in this direction, and one on a hill behind us, about 1,000 meters. So at the time of Vimy, the most advanced flash spotting section in the British Army is in the Canadian Corps, but I've never seen flash spotting in the field before, so I'm quite excited to see how it works.
Okay, here we go, guys. Ready for the countdown. 5, 4...
3, 2, 1, fire. See it?
Seen.
Observers send back their bearings on the flash to headquarters. By intersecting these bearings from known observer positions, they locate the enemy guns and provide the magic number.
It all comes down to math and science. I'd say we're probably within 20 meters of the target right now.
Now, it's showtime.
At my command.
From safety, data safe.
Number 1, adjust fire. Number 1, fire. What? Fire!
But flash spotting is not an exact science.
Number 1, fire.
Even with modern weapons, even with no one shooting at them, today's soldiers find it difficult to replicate what those in 1917 were able to do in the heat of battle.
It's killing me. It's killing me. Right now, we're engaging a target out there, and I had a round that hit just behind. I could see the shrapnel going of that target, and I just I just dropped my elevation, but because the wind factor and everything, we went a little bit farther. But if I go in effect, we'll destroy that thing. We're not missing. You can go check the holes. If you're in the box there, you'll let me know if we're missing. Come on, baby.
Hey, that's a target roll!
End of mission. Good shooting gun.
Deep underground at Vimy, a different detection system is needed to prevent Germans from planting deadly mines, one that relies not on eyes, but on ears. Soldiers are positioned strategically throughout the tunnels at special listening stations.
At this point, we're in a listening tunnel. The German tunnels were in that direction, not very far, probably about 10, 15 meters. The listening officer would bring with him an instrument called a geophone. And what the listening officer would do would be move these microphones. What I'm listening for is tapping, the kind of noise of a pick hitting the chalk, possibly occasionally a ringing noise where it hits a flint. And also, are they shoveling? Maybe the sounds of a trolley or sacks of spoil being dragged away down the tunnel.
When a sound is detected, it comes through louder in one ear than the other. By moving the second microphone towards the first, a spot is reached where the sound is of equal volume in both ears. The microphones are now directly in line with the enemy. A fixed compass bearing taken at a right angle to this line reveals the enemy's location. The deadly games of cat and mouse are also playing out in broad daylight, thousands of feet above the ground, where Dudley Holmes finds himself fighting for his life.
Lieutenant Holmes is in a flight of 3 aircraft who are actually on a reconnaissance mission. As they come in to do their reconnaissance, they find themselves in a very difficult situation. Attacked by 14 German aircraft. And a dogfight starts in which they get split up. And you can imagine in this dogfight, Lieutenant Holmes trying to say to his pilot, they're over there, they're over there, they're over there, hanging on for grim death. It's actually inside a thing which they really call the pulpit, because it's like a pulpit in a church. And it comes up to sort of mid-calf height, no higher than that. And you stand up in that, you've got a machine gun to your front, to your right, you've got the camera, which you're going to operate when required. And then by turning right around, and you can't be strapped in, by the way, you've then got the other machine gun. And the good thing about that one is you can then fire to the rear. The bad news is you won't know when the pilot makes an evasive action. And the great danger then is falling out. And you can imagine people in the same position as I am now, looking up, wondering, is he going to come down, is he not? And then occasionally having to duck as the spent cases tumble all over this area.
Dudley Holmes' plane is hit and begins to plunge 6,000 feet. But his pilot manages to crash land in a field. By a miracle of war, Dudley and his fellow airmen walk away unharmed. A hospital checkup clears him to take part in the battle. But not all trips to hospital are as heroic. Some are of a more delicate nature.
This is the old clinic for VD, venereal disease, STDs. An area like this, which is just on the edge of Leicester Square, would have been full of servicemen. The only women around, frankly, would have been women of disrepute. As one soldier says, that in a short journey between Piccadilly Circus and Berkeley Square, he was accosted by 16 prostitutes.
Away from home for the first time in their lives, thousands of young soldiers find solace in the company of strangers. One of these soldiers is Jack Carter.
He was suffering from gonorrhea, contracted at some point during his time, perhaps in the UK, more likely in France. And he was away from the unit for about a month and a half, which is a long time.
For the Canadian Corps, VD is nothing short of an epidemic. Because their soldiers have the most money to spend on leave, Canadians are diagnosed with VD more than any other soldiers.
He loses all leave entitlement of 12 months, so he doesn't spread infection to people at home. The next thing is they don't pay him for all the time he's in hospital. So if anybody at home was dependent on his pay coming in, it stops completely. He gets no money and no money is sent home in allowances. So everybody at home would have known at the time something was wrong. Whether they asked or not, they certainly would have known it wasn't right.
The loss of men in the field is always a problem, but greater now that the battle is just a week away. To ensure that each man in the field counts, the Canadians come up with a first. They create a fifth line of defense, men whose sole mission is to protect the soldiers moving across the field, to literally watch their backs.
In 1916, what the British found was that the Germans would pop up behind them out of bunkers after they'd passed by and shoot them in the back. So the tactic of having guys to stay behind and make sure the Germans don't do that is evolved. And those guys are called moppers up. Now this is something the Canadians reorganized themselves for at Vimy. They added a fifth section so the assault troops don't have to get down in the German trenches. They don't get mired down. They can keep pushing as fast as they can through the German positions. They're going to look for any surviving Germans. They'll put out sentries to guard against Germans sneaking back in behind us. So what they'll do is they'll either get their surrender or they'll put grenades down the entrance, and then they will stay there and guard that entrance so that no Germans can sneak out and shoot into the backs of the Canadians as they move up the ridge. And now our platoon is set back up. The barrage is falling just in front of them. It's going to lift again. They're going to get up and do this for the next 100 yards. Moppers up really boost the confidence of the Canadian soldiers, and it really helps them push up the ridge and not worry about what's past and what's behind them. They're just looking toward the crest and getting up that hill.
With only 7 days left before they charge at the ridge, soldiers, stone-tired from months of training, receive final packages from their loved ones back home. Amidst the chaos of war, soldiers savor the faint connection they have with the world they left behind.
What looks to all like 50 cigarettes. Craven A.
Get that in the I've never seen one as good as that.
Has even got the black cat. Trademark.
It might not necessarily have been used for cigarettes, but it might well have been used to keep something else like letters or something in. You know, I'm only speculating here. It may well have 50 cigarettes, which is what it says on the box.
Dear Mother, last night I was talking with a soldier who was going back to Canada. I could have thrown my rifle as far as I could and followed him. This country may be pretty, but there are faraway fields that look prettier to me now. I remain your son, Percy.
On April 2nd, 1917, the Canadian Corps steps up the action with the largest artillery barrage history had ever seen. Full-on shelling of the German trenches for a solid week, using more than 1 million rounds of artillery. the final stage in the plan to cripple German defenses in advance of the attack. By its end, 83% of the enemy guns are destroyed. The thunder can be heard all the way to London. Germans call it Die Leidenswoche, the week of suffering. April 8, 1917, Easter Sunday, the eve of the battle. The noise of the gun echoes deep underground, where soldiers like Jack Carter, knowing they may never go home again, leave their final marks on the hard, chalky walls.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at this carving. It's amazing. Looks like somebody's name there. Vancouver, British Columbia. It's written right here, look. That's why God put artists on this earth, so people will know that people don't forget things.
To make sure their short lives will not be forgotten, they leave their silent messages, not only in the miles of subways, but also in tunnels and in old medieval caves that shelter these boys from the shells above.
Oh, look at this one. Private A. McMillan, 48th Highlanders, Toronto, Canada.
In their final minutes, they pray in silence. They contemplate their youth and lives barely lived, the loves they will never have, the children they will never hold.
Soldiers from Woodford, Ontario, from New Liskeard, Ontario, which would have been a small mining town at the time. So I guess what struck me is seeing towns like New Liskeard on the wall. I mean, my cottage is just outside of New Liskeard, and to see the name on there really brings it home. I mean, it's just like it was written yesterday.
The marks on the wall tell where they were born, what girl they were sweet on back home, and that they are soldiers, Canadian soldiers.
One of the features of the graffiti in this particular cave is the maple leaf, and for a modern Canadian that makes complete sense, but it wasn't on the flag in 1917, but where it was on cap badges and shoulder titles. So men are taking the symbol of their military unit and carving it into the sides of the cave. There's no question, it's a seminal moment in the creating of a Canadian national conscience.
Easter Monday, April 9th, 1917, 5:30 a.m. After months of planning and training, the Canadian Corps is ready to unite its three dimensions in attack. In the skies, Dudley Holmes and fellow airmen lead bombing raids high above Vimy Ridge. From deep underground, Jack Carter and thousands of soldiers emerge from subways to join up with Percy James and others in the trenches. Behind a moving wall of artillery fire, they flood German lines in the wake of the creeping barrage. 20,000 men moving as one, storming across no man's land. For the first time, all four Canadian divisions fight side by side, attacking the ridge's eastern slopes. Percy James's 2nd Division dodges shell holes and mine craters. 30 minutes into their charge, the German front line is captured. An hour later, they take the second line. 24 hours later, the 4th Division climbs Hill 145, the highest and best defended part of the ridge, and takes it, despite fierce fighting by the Germans. The Germans' last stronghold is the Pimple, at the northernmost tip of the ridge. It falls on Thursday, April 12th, and the Battle of Vimy Ridge is over. A daring plan, bravely executed, has won the seemingly invincible stronghold in just 4 days.
Vimy Ridge is a stunning and complete victory. And it's our Corps that does it. It's the Canadian Corps. They had so much pride in what they accomplished, and they did it wearing Canada on their shoulders. So it means that's where they became Canadians, very much so.
Canada, a country barely 50 years old, has done what no one thought possible. It's the first major Allied victory in 18 months. But that victory comes at a price. Almost 3,600 Canadian soldiers never go home.
I walked the war-torn countrysides, the bloody battle streets, where young men fought and died because they wanted to be free.
On the final day of the dig, researchers gather one last time to pay homage to those who fought and those who fell.
With their friends, I thank God for this country, mister, that we're living in. There are no cries from fighting soldiers dying in our streets. I wouldn't trade $1 million for a single maple leaf.
Left a little pick and shovel right here. Tools he used to dig those tunnels. Sapper. T. Acton, Canadian Engineers, April 9th.
So it makes you think of all the guys that died underground, like who did all that tunneling at Vimy. It's so emotional. Makes you proud to be Canadian. Proud to be here. We're on sacred ground, for sure.
It is guys like Dudley Holmes, Percy James, Jack Carter, who really are unsung. When friends of yours are killed around you and you still have the courage to force your way to the top of Vimy Ridge, in my view, you're not really just an ordinary man. That's what I walk away with, is a huge sense of respect and admiration, and you know, at the end of the day, an overwhelming sense of pride that these guys are Canadian.
And it's Maple Leafs as far as the eye can see, pretty much, you know. You can't read every name, but it's hard to stop reading the names, you know. It's so.
Miraculously, all 3 Goderich boys survived the war. Jack Carter returns to Goderich, where he becomes a piano stringer for local churches. Dudley Holmes becomes an attorney in his father's law firm, and eventually a judge. Percy James marries his high school sweetheart, starts a family, and later they open a small TV shop in downtown Goderich.
Dear Mother and Father, we are now at the east side of the Rhine. We crossed the border into Germany on the 6th of December. There was a man there with a camera making a moving picture. Maybe one day you may see it, for I am in it. I remain your son, Percy James.